This morning's scripture reading is from the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 16 to 19. Listen for the word of the Lord. Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David. Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will hand over both Israel and you to the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, Halloween is this week. It is my least favorite holiday. I'm not even sure if I want to call it a holiday. I don't really consider it one, but many people do. It's definitely my least favorite day of the year. It comes from Ireland. The traditions all come from Ireland, and it was a day to fear the dead. The dead supposedly walked maybe at night, who knows, and you were supposed to be afraid of the dead. And so that's where masks come in. The masks were supposed to scare the dead people who came back to haunt us. How it made its way from that Irish pagan tradition to today, where we dress up in silly costumes and ask for candy, I have no idea how it made the trip from here to there. Maybe it was Hershey or Mars M&M that came up with the idea, ooh, let's make some money on this. I have no idea. It's crazy. But in honor of Halloween, decided to do the story of the Witch of Endor. How many know the story of the Witch of Endor? Anybody ever read the story? Okay, so you're going to have to read chapter 28 of 1 Samuel. You're going to have to read the whole chapter. I'm going to describe it for you, though. I'm going to talk about it, but you have to read that story, the Witch of Endor. Okay, so the story starts chapter 15 of 1 Samuel. Saul does not follow God's will. Saul has been king for a long. God made Saul king, but Saul refuses to follow God's will. So God turns against Saul, and the prophet Samuel anoints David. David is God's chosen. No longer King Saul. So when Saul turns away from God's will, Saul starts to suffer. He suffers from an evil spirit. And as he suffers, he searches for an answer. He searches for a solution. In chapter 16, he has David play the harp for him. David plays, and Saul feels better. But it's only temporary. And then the other problem Saul has, along with this pain that he feels, he also has anger, tremendous anger. And so he tries to kill David, despite the fact that David plays the harp for him, and David is also a general in his army, and the most successful general Saul has in his army. Saul tries to kill David. Chapters 18 and chapter 19, he tries to kill David. Then Saul chases David away. David flees and hides. Saul chases after David. In chapter 22, Saul kills priests of God and their families because they helped David. So Saul's anger and fierce pride and anger is causing him to commit terrible crimes. In chapter 24, David meets Saul in a cave, and David has a chance of killing Saul, and David does not. And Saul and David speak to each other, and Saul acknowledges that he has sinned before the Lord, and that David will be king, that God has anointed David. But that still doesn't stop Saul. Saul continues to chase after David, continues to try to kill him, and David once again flees. Chapter 27, he goes to work for the Philistines as a mercenary. So that leads to the story of the witch of Endor. Witchcraft is illegal in the law of Moses. Okay, what does that mean? If God wills somebody to be healed, it's God's will. It's not me. If I lay my hands on somebody, I anoint somebody with oil, I pray to the Lord with all the fervor I can pray, and this person is healed, is miraculously healed. It's not me, it's God. God did it. God may have decided to use me at this moment as a conduit, an intercessor, but it's up to God whether that happens. And the same goes for prophecy. If God sends me a vision of the future, and I prophesy, and it is true, it is a true prophecy, it's because God sent me the prophecy, not because I am special. But witchcraft is different. Witchcraft, people attempt to do things without God, attempt to heal people, attempt to have visions, attempt to maybe hurt somebody. It's a way of trying to get around God, God's power and authority, and do what I want to do. Not what God wants to do, what I want to do. So therefore it's condemned in the law of Moses. And Saul also condemned it. It was part of the law. You don't do witchcraft. But what happens? Saul is troubled. He's facing a battle. He's in a lot of discomfort and pain and discomfort. The prophet Samuel has died, and the prophet Samuel was his go-to guy. You know, the man he used to go to, oh, tell me what to do. Well, he should have gone to God, because Samuel just speaks the words God wants. But Samuel is gone. He's dead. So he goes to a witch in a town called Endor. And he goes and he asks her to bring up dead Solomon, to do her witchcraft thing and bring up a dead man so he can talk to Solomon. She does this, and in verses 16 to 19 we read today, we have Solomon's response, which is, you have sinned before the Lord, you have been rejected by the Lord, what do you want me to do? I'm dead. What do you expect me to do? This is all the Lord's doing. So, Saul goes off, fights his battle, dies in the battle. Eventually, David becomes king. Well, what happens? Saul walks away from God, number one. Saul walked away from God. The Old Testament tells him what to do. All he had to do was read the law of Moses. If you have sinned before the Lord, you humble yourself before God, and you ask God to forgive you. What does King David do when he is caught in adultery? And he has murdered the wife's husband, so he can marry this man's wife. What does David do when he is confronted by the prophet? He humbles himself before the Lord, and he begs for forgiveness. He goes to God. This is not what Saul does. Saul goes to other means. He seeks other ways to help him when he is afflicted with an illness. He does not humble himself before the Lord and beg the Lord for forgiveness. Instead, he seeks help from David's harp playing. He seeks help from a witch who brings up Samuel in a way to he does not go to God. And he suffers, and he also commits terrible acts. So, what should he have done? Let us go to the Scripture and see what he should do. And what we all should do. And as I read this, I thought about, well, how does this translate into today's world? And for me, it translates with depression. What Saul seems to be suffering from sounds like depression to me. And I have experienced it and stress and depression myself. And so I can connect with Saul, at least in a way, if I think about it, that this is some sort of depression that he's going through. And he's trying to find a way to be healed from it. Which, of course, anyone who has experienced depression, we all want to be healed. So, where do we go? We go to the Scriptures. That's where Saul should have gone in the first place. But this is what we're today. So, first, I want to look at Paul, the Apostle Paul, because Paul also suffered. And what's wonderful about the writings of Paul in the New Testament is that he talks about his personal problems and issues, and he talks about how he deals with them. So, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. Paul says he has a thorn in his flesh. In other words, there's something bothering him. And he's using a metaphor. He's talking about, he says, I have a thorn in my flesh. He has some physical ailment. And he doesn't say directly what it is. But instead he says, it is God, I prayed to God to heal me, and God said no. And so I realized that God did this to me, a thorn in my flesh, so to humble me, to make me humble. And he accepts it. He accepts that this is something that is for his own good. And so, one of the problems that we have, that I have noticed, at least in my life, is we make our own stress. We get stressed out about this, we get stressed out about that, we get stressed out about everything. Everything. I have a cold, I get stressed. I have a money problem, I get stressed. I have this, I have that. I stress. The Apostle Paul says, I have a problem. And you know what? It's okay. If God has given me this problem, then that means I can handle it. Then that means God has a plan for me, and I can handle it. Acceptance, in other words. Look at me. I've had to accept a lot of things in my life. I've had to accept. I got to accept the fact that I'm blind as a bat if I take off my glasses. You're all a blur if I take off my glasses. But I had to accept that. I've had to accept that I have these little moles on my skin that are trying to kill me. I go to a dermatologist every year and have them checked because sometimes they turn into cancer. And if we catch them in time, then I get to live a little bit longer. And if we don't catch them in time, then they're going to kill me. So I just, okay, what do I do? I just accept it and say, you know, Lord, I don't understand this. This makes no sense whatsoever. Why would a part of my skin want to try to kill me? It makes no sense. But if it's your will for my life, if this is part of your grand plan that's beyond my comprehension, then it's okay. It's okay. And so Paul at least has helped me to be less stressed out by things and to be more accepting of my problems and failings. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. There are divisions between Peter, the Apostle Paul, and Apollos. And there are arguments going on within the church. And Paul calls for unity under Christ. We are not individuals. We are united under Christ. There's a bigger picture here than our petty little arguments, than our differences. There's a bigger picture, and that's Jesus' mission on this earth. We've been put in charge of Jesus' mission, and Jesus' mission is bigger than all of us. So we got to put aside these silly arguments and focus on the big picture, the mission. Well, what does that mean? We're too concerned about others. Part of Saul's problem is he's concerned about David. David's a great general, and he's concerned that David's going to usurp him, going to push him out of the way and become king. Well, that's exactly what happens because of him, because he turned away from God. He focused too much on what was happening around him, on other people, and he didn't focus upon the Lord and what the Lord wanted him to do. He lost sight of the big picture. And once again, as a minister, I'm concerned about what other people think of me, because I am given responsibility for being a representative of Jesus Christ. You know, big responsibility. I'm concerned about what people think of me, and I should be. But at the same time, I can't let that pull me, tear me apart. And it happens. It's one of the great stresses of the ministry is the internal politics of the church tear ministers apart. I graduated with 40 people in my seminary class, 40 people. Within 5 years, most of those people were no longer ministers. Within 5 years. And that's because the ministry tore them up. Emotionally. It's through God's grace that I am still a minister, because it's been a hard life. Emotionally, hard life. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Paul talks about his sufferings, but then he says, I rejoice. I rejoice in my sufferings because of the love, truth, and patience that God has given me. The righteous, in other words, I live the right life. God has shown me how to live a righteous life, a life that's right in God's eyes, a righteous life. And so, and that includes being loving, being truthful, being patient with people, and so I rejoice in the Lord, he says. I rejoice in the Lord because the Lord has given me the ability to live a righteous, a good, a wonderful, fulfilling life. And you know what? Absolutely. When I struggle, I rejoice in the Lord. That's number one on the list. I say thank you. I say thank you every time. Because I say thank you every day. But I rejoice in the Lord. Because the Lord has blessed me so much. I mean, the Lord has not blessed me with money, unfortunately. That's okay. That's okay. The Lord has not blessed me with perfect health. That's okay. The Lord has not blessed me with fame. Fame. Yeah, that's okay. Instead, the Lord has blessed me by helping me live a righteous life, by helping me live a good life, a wonderful life, a loving, caring, patient life. Despite my failings, because the Lord has blessed me. And so I rejoice. And that makes such a difference in life. Such a difference to be able to rejoice, to be able to say thank you to God, even when you're depressed. It makes a huge difference. And then 2 Corinthians chapter 6 continues. He continues and he talks about this concept. I used to get into discussions with people in my old church in Piscataway about this being equally yoked. Do not be yoked with unbelievers, and whether you should marry an unbeliever or marry somebody who's different from you or something like that. And over the years, I've realized that what he's talking about is don't let other people drag you down. Don't marry somebody who's going to drag you into paganism. Don't marry somebody who's going to drag you into drug abuse. Don't marry somebody who's going to drag you into depression. Don't be yoked with people who have their own problems, and their problems are going to grab me and drag me down into the pit. And that makes so much sense to me. This unequally yoked is talking about being destroyed by somebody. In other words, be discerning. Be discerning about the people around us. There are people around us who will drag us into the pit. If we let them, but only if we let them. Be discerning, godly discernment. Jesus inspired discernment. No, be wise, be discerning. That's another very helpful, and that's helped me a lot over the years. Then I want to, if you've never read the little, there's a tiny little book in the New Testament called Philemon, and it is always tough to find because I turn the pages so fast that I miss it. It's only a one-page book in the Bible. There it is, after Titus. There you go. And it's very short. You could read it in about 10 minutes. And it's a letter about forgiveness. Because this gentleman named Onesimus has run away from his home. And he is a servant. He is not allowed to run away. So he can be arrested. He can be charged with a crime. He's run away from home. It doesn't say why, Onesimus. And he's run to Paul. He's a Christian believer, and he's run off to Paul to talk to Paul about his problems. So Paul sends him back home with this letter. And what Paul says to his master, Philemon, forgive him. Forgive him. That's a powerful message. Always a powerful message. Because anger, resentment, revenge will drag us into the pit, will destroy us. Forgiveness lifts a burden off of our shoulder, lifts a huge burden off of our shoulder, and is a great blessing. Forgiveness. And it's hard. It's hard. I've been hurt. I'm sure all of us have been hurt in our lives. It's not an easy thing to do, but it lifts a huge burden off of us. And anger and resentment will just fester and will destroy us. So let's go through the list here. Let's go through the list. Humility. Humility. Which means humbling ourselves before the Lord. Humble ourselves before the Lord. Discernment. Being wise in who we allow into our inner circle. Who we allow, and making sure we don't have people in our inner circle who are going to drag us down. Living a righteous life, which means living a life that's right in God's eyes. Forgiveness, casting away that burden. And we also have to remember that Jesus said, be merciful as God is merciful. And he also says that if we don't show mercy, if we don't show forgiveness, then God won't show mercy or forgiveness towards us. So forgiveness is such a powerful, uplifting thing, and it releases so much negative energy and negative feeling. And then rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Yes. Joy. Rejoicing in the Lord. Absolutely. So, I have, okay, so I've been pretty open recently, opened up, last year or so, opened up about one of my challenges of life, and that is that I had a major panic attack about 7 or 8 years ago, and it almost destroyed me. And since then, I've continued to have minor panic attacks. It's sort of back there, in the background. You know, it sort of hides. And then all of a sudden it kind of starts coming out, you know, and then it goes back, and that kind of thing. And so, my choice is pills, you know, being dependent upon pills, or find another way. And so over the years, I have worked very hard at trying to find another way. Because what the panic attack does is it clouds my judgment. It's like a veil that descends over my whole being, and I can't see, I can't think clearly. And it also causes anger. I get angry for dumb reasons, and lose my temper for very, very dumb reasons. So, I don't want to make the mistakes Paul made. What were Paul's mistakes? He did not go to God. He did not humble himself before the Lord. He did not go seek the advice and counsel of the right people. For example, he should have gone to David. David would have helped him. Or he should have gone to his son Jonathan. His son Jonathan was a wise, good man. He should have sought Jonathan's counsel. Jonathan tried to counsel him. Tried. And he did not listen. Instead, he goes to the witch of Endor. Who is she? What would she possibly know? And he did not search the scriptures for answers to his problems. He did not humble himself before the Lord. So, instead, following Paul's advice and also the teachings of Jesus, as I have sought to try to battle this whatever this is, first, go to God. If you have a problem like me, depression or whatever, you go to God. We have to go to God. We have to humble ourselves before the Lord. We have to say, Lord, I can't do this without you. I cannot do this without you. The world around us is constantly coming up with brilliant ideas as to fixing this and healing that, and that's all great. That's all great. If I wanted to take the pills would work. But the pills have problems that associated with them. And that's the problem. That's the thing. I don't want to get involved in that. So I go to God. And then I go to other people who can help me. People who are wise, people who I trust. And I go to them for advice and support. Seek to live a righteous life. A life right in God's eyes. So one of the challenges is, okay, let's say my friend, I call him my friend. My friend, the panic attack starts, it's kind of sneaking in here, and I start getting a little crazy, a little angry, a little crazy. What I do then is I pray and meditate. I try to recognize it. Because what'll happen is it'll grab me in some dumb thing. Something like some dumb thing that happens in the church. Somebody put a bag of garbage in the wrong place. Okay. Oh, they put it there again. Do you believe this? They put it there again. You can't do that. You can't do that. That's a terrible thing. It needs to be put over here. Little things, you know what I'm saying? Little things can really we can take a little thing and turn it into a big thing. And that's what happens to me when, I'm under assault. And it feels like I'm under attack, that's really what it feels like. That some presence is attacking me from outside of me. Crazy. So focus on what is right. Recognize that this is not right. Getting upset about a bag of garbage in the wrong place is not right. And pray. And I pray over and over, Lord, you calmed the Sea of Galilee. You calmed the storm. You can calm the storm in me. You calm the storm inside of me. This works. It works. Because it's scriptural, it's